Welcome to the September iteration of the ARPA Advisory Committee. Sometimes I know we're meeting on a bi-monthly basis here, so sometimes I'm kind of forgetful of what steps we gotta follow here. But I think the first order of business is going to be Keith, you reading off those meeting rules.
All right. Thanks, Gunnar. The meeting of the ARPA Advisory Transformational Committee are public meetings as defined by the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act and should follow those guidelines. As this public meeting is held virtually, it will be recorded and made available to view on the DDS website. Committee members must make a good faith effort to state their name and title if applicable each time they speak during the meeting. If a committee member would like to speak, please raise your hand and one of the co-chairs will acknowledge you. There is no public comment portion to this meeting. Members of the public are able to join, watch, and listen only.
Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA Project Coordinator. Thank you, Keith. Next order of business is going to be the approval of the July 17th meeting minutes. Before I ask for a motion to approve, are there any edits to those minutes as they currently stand? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you, Tracy and Wynn. Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA Project Coordinator. So we have a pretty light agenda for you guys today. The one thing that we wanted to cover with all of you is kind of that usual update around transformation plans, the number of folks who have transitioned as part of the STEP initiative. We're going to have an opportunity here to review one of the transformation plans that we recently approved out of the West region. The provider ARI had their plan approved as of August 19th. So we'll kind of dive into some of those details and then talk about a few other providers that we know are actively working on submitting plans. And to kind of tie that up, we'll talk a little bit about some of the associated deadlines around participating in the STEP initiative. After that, we'll kind of move into that open discussion portion. As always, you guys got questions, comments, concerns, feedback during the presentation. Feel free to use that raise hand function or just come off mute, kind of interject. And if you got nothing during that, we can always, conversate after during that open discussion portion. So want to start with, again, those metrics updates. I don't remember exactly where we were at metrics wise for approved transformation plans when we met in July. I think we were hovering right around 20. So 20 providers had submitted plans to participate in the STEP initiative. 20 providers have been approved. In the last month and a half, again, like I said earlier, ARI had their transformation plan approved. It's a blended plan that focuses on some residential transitions and some employment focused transitions. So we're going to get to cover that in a minute. We have, that we know of, a couple other providers that are actively working on submitting transformation plans. Resources for Human Development, RHD, we know is working on a plan that's going to be submitted to the West region in the coming months. We're also aware that Eastern Community Development Corporation is working on a plan. David, our South Region Resource Administrator, and his team are kind of coordinating with ECDC on that plan development and submission. So hopefully in the next few months here, we're going to have 23 different provider agencies with approved plans. We were talking last time about some of the successful transitions that had occurred as a part of the STEP initiative. I know at this point in time those numbers were kind of relatively low. I think at the July meeting there were 41 individuals that had successfully made a move to a more community-based support option. In the last month and a half, 13 additional folks have transitioned as part of STEP, so that brings us up to 54 transitions that have occurred through those kind of different transformation plans. And I would like to mention that I think one of the ways we had trouble communicating about STEP as a department is, some folks were under the impression, both internally and externally to DDS, that, these transitions to more community-based support options were only occurring through the STEP initiative. And as I think many of you on this call are aware, that's simply not the case. This work to move individuals who are interested in doing so away from those congregate settings to community-based supports is work that, you as providers, and family members and case managers have been doing, supporting and kind of moving forward for a number of years. So I wanted to touch on that. And I know last time we spoke, we kind of dived into, and I think it was raised by you, when some of the issues around this kind of slow progress with STEP. And I think we did, as a department, a fairly good job at developing the framework for this thing. And a lot of that is due to, folks like Keith, Peter, and Greg McMahon, who, if you look back 2 years ago, none of this was in place, right? That framework there were no transformation plan templates, there were no incentives, there was no description of how those incentives kind of tied into the initiative, what money would be kind of attached to each of those. What role the resource teams and the review committees would play. And I think Peter, Keith, and Greg did an exceptional job of standing that piece of it up. And we obviously had McDowell Communications and Deloitte assisting us in that process. One of the things I think we did have trouble with was communicating what exactly we were trying to convey through the STEP initiative. And I think at the time, if you look back a couple years, we kind of touted it as this kind of transformational initiative that focused on innovation, and a lot of the stuff kind of occurring through STEP was new and exciting. And while I think that kind of conversation was appropriate at the time, right? You need to generate excitement. You need to generate kind of this enthusiasm and engagement. I don't think it was necessarily accurate. And I think there were some providers that looked at that conversation and said, well, that's interesting because we've been doing that work for years, right? Transitions from CLAs to an individual's own home where they receive IHS supports, that's nothing new. And I think it took us a long time to kind of get our communications around this thing right. But I think really when you look at the initiative, what we're trying to do for both external and internal stakeholders is kind of pull back the curtain, so to speak, and shine a light on the work that you as providers, our case managers, our resource teams, that work that has been going on for a number of years. There are plenty of folks externally to DDS who I don't think are well versed in kind of the day-to-day operations that occur through Oak Hill, Marrakesh, ARI, some of these provider agencies. And STEP has really allowed us to kind of shine a light on that. I think in hindsight, it would have been helpful to kind of get that way to communicate about it kind of squared away right off the kind of get. But things were, I think, a little rocky in the way that we kind of approached communicating to stakeholders about STEP. And I think, Wynn, to your point, that maybe played a role in not only providers kind of coming to the table and being willing to engage in the initiative, but I think it created not a lot, but some levels of confusion around what exactly the department was trying to get across when we were communicating about the initiative. So at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do with STEP. We're trying to pull back the curtain, shine a light on the work that you guys have been doing, the work that DDS has been doing, and continue to encourage folks to work with individuals and their support teams to move them towards either more meaningful employment or more independent, day in residential settings. So just kind of wanted to make a note there. I was reviewing the last meeting minutes, and I kind of revisited that point that you had brought up, When. So circling back to what I was talking about earlier, again, we have 21 approved transformation plans. We've got RHD and ECDC kind of in the pipeline for this thing. We now have 54 individuals that have transitioned. Again, a 13 kind of point increase from the last time that we met. So that's exciting. And I'm hopeful that that's kind of indicative of kind of what's to come over the next few months as we get closer to the end of the ARPA period. For those of you providers on the call that do have approved plans, I just want to mention a few kind of noteworthy deadlines to be aware of. And I guess this applies to folks who maybe are still kind of on the fence about participating in this thing. Transformation plans need to be submitted to the department no later than December 1st of this year. So December 1, 2024 is the deadline to submit a transformation plan to the department. The deadline to submit one times for any of the incentives that your agency becomes eligible for through an approved plan is March 31st, 2025. So the ARPA period ends June 30th, 2025. We've got this March 31st, 2025 deadline to submit those one times. So our department can kind of process everything, make sure you guys get paid out. And it allows us to have a little bit of buffer time to kind of see what excess monies we have in those separate pots. So just wanted to, make sure you folks are aware of some of those deadlines there. The one thing I said we were going to cover, and I think it's kind of the last on my list, is reviewing ARI's approved transformation plan. So I'm going to share my screen here. Pull this over here. So this is our STEP approved provider approaches document. I'm pretty sure you guys have all gotten a chance to take a look at this, but it really does an excellent job at kind of capturing all the work that these different providers are doing and encouraging movement to more community-based support options and the way in which they're supporting those transitions. So we're going to go kind of dive right into it here. Again, this is available on the website. I'll put the link in the chat if you guys want to take a look at it. You kind of start off here. You've got the STEP logo. You've got, Connecticut DDS, nice cover page there. You come down and you've got this helpful kind of table of contents, and it outlines a few things. It talks about, you have kind of a link to a general overview of the initiative. You've got relevant acronyms. I know DDS throws out new acronyms basically every other month. So you got relevant acronyms in there for your viewing. And then you come down and you can see all the different providers that are currently participating in some form or another in the STEP initiative. So we're going to come down here. We're going to click on ARI. It's going to drag us right to their plan. And a lot of these slides are very similar, right? Up in here, this top left corner, you've got kind of a general overview of what that agency is focusing on. In the bottom left, you get an understanding of how many individuals are encompassed within their plan. You get to see the programs that are involved. So both those congregate and those community-based support settings. We tell you if they're planning on restructuring a setting. And then over here are the kind of the key highlights as to how that provider is going to execute those transitions, support those transitions, and prepare individuals in certain cases for either more meaningful employment opportunities, job readiness, or kind of preparing them to live more independently in their communities. So the plan breaks down as follows. So at bottom left here, again, you got 12 individuals. You have 2 res and 2 kind of two res and 10 day in employment transitions. So for res, you have for this plan, it's 2 individuals that are going to move from a group home to their own apartments where they're going to utilize IHS supports. On the day in employment side, you have 10 individuals total, 7 of which are going to move from a GSE to ISE. And 3 of which are going to move from a DSO to ISE. So again, 12 total. Coming over to the plan highlights here. And again, I touched on this a little bit when I talked about the way in which the department was communicating about STEP. A lot of the stuff that ARI has incorporated into their plan is material and kind of approaches to supporting transitions that a lot of you providers are going to be familiar with. Starting off with peer support and housing exploration. So ARI is giving individuals the chance to speak with peers who have undergone similar transitions, showing candidates housing settings, allowing them to meet current tenants, and understanding living conditions firsthand. And again, we've seen this approach in other plans, and I'm always appreciative when providers kind of build this into how they plan to support a transition. I know from experiences, whether it was college or finding my first apartment or just talking with some of my buddies, if I'm about to go through something, or even kind of my time in the military, if I'm about to go to a school or I'm about to kind of attend my first college course, And I'm a little apprehensive as to, what my responsibilities are, the way this is going to kind of look. It's always helpful to kind of talk to a friend, talk to a mentor, or have that kind of preparation so you know a little bit about what you're about to walk into. So again, really kind of not unique to ARI's plan, but it's always exciting when they kind of build that aspect in their prep to help transition folks. In addition to that, under that same bullet there, they're working on, and again, nothing new here, but collaborating with families and support teams to identify suitable housing units, addressing concerns such as, and this has always been a big one, transportation, and things like walkability, accessibility, and roommate compatibility. For a lot of these folks, especially on the residential side, this is going to be an entirely new environment for them. And sometimes that kind of folks can get a little apprehensive about, finally living independently in their communities, and have a lot of questions around, well, what does my transportation look like? What's, is my area walkable? Can I get to kind of some of the resources that I need to get to? Again, accessibility. So ARI kind of taking this proactive approach, it is just kind of allowing that transition to kind of play out a little more smoothly when it starts to kind of run through. Moving down to that second bullet there, job readiness and skills development. Again, we've seen this across a number of plans, but ARI staff is going to work on developing kind of employment-focused curriculums. They're going to host discussion groups and organize skills activities to prepare individuals for competitive employment. They're going to do things like hold weekly sessions led by an employment specialist to cover things like work experience and lessons learned. Again, all in preparation for that individual to finally land in that more independent setting and kind of be prepared to take on what those kind of new responsibilities may be. Additionally, and I think this one is more unique to ARI. ARI is bringing in a peer mentor with a disability to provide one-on-one training to improve things like math, reading, and other soft job skills. And these training opportunities kind of continue to work to support workforce preparation. So I really like that they kind of incorporated that piece into their plan. Again, learning from kind of a peer as to what their experiences were, what some of those kind of vocational skills that you should have under your belt, what those are. Preparing for those transitions is incredibly important part of that process. So always happy to see that kind of incorporated into their plan. And the third piece here, kind of wrapping it all up. And again, seeing this across a number of different plans. I think there's 5+ providers that are participating in STEP that are eliminating a sub-minimum wage arrangement. And by doing so, they're taking advantage of that $33,000 restructuring incentive. So ARI is planning on eliminating sub-minimum wage in their GSE program by December 31st, 2024. The program will be restructured to offer all individuals competitive wages while maintaining the current support structure, which is a really kind of key piece to this. Because individuals who have been receiving sub-minimum wage will not kind of be displaced here. So just wanted to highlight that piece. Roll down a little bit. And I thought this was a unique approach. I haven't seen this in other plans, but I'm sure other agencies are kind of in tune with this approach to preparing individuals for more individualized employment opportunities. But each participant will have personalized employment-related goals to achieve before their wages are increased to competitive levels, which emphasizes the importance of performance in competitive employment. So I thought that was kind of an interesting approach to preparing these individuals to receive that competitive wage and again, increase those kind of vocational skill development opportunities. So again, always happy to kind of review this tool with you guys. Again, it gives a kind of a comprehensive overview of these different transformation plans. I'll put the link in the chat when we close this meeting out. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And so that's really it. I talked about having a light agenda today. Wanted to review some of the metrics with you, wanted to give you an overview of that ARI plan so you can get an understanding of, again, what some of these provider approaches to participating in STEP look like. At this point in time, what I'll do is turn the conversation over to all of you. I don't know if you guys have questions, comments, feedback on any of the material, the metrics I covered, or anything kind of just off the cuff that you guys want to shoot out there. I know I'm, certainly not the guy with all the answers, but always happy to take things back to leadership and circle back with all of you. So again, feel free to use that raise hand function, come off mute, however you guys see fit. Barry.
Sorry about that. Welcome back and thank you, Barry, Simon, Oak Hill. And I appreciate that. Is there any presentation on the plans that were not accepted? Obviously, we submitted ours for, innovative practice for 50 individuals to be, have residential alternative. But is that reported anywhere, that the plans that didn't get accepted?
So Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator, Barry, unfortunately, that's not part of that document, and we don't have kind of a separate communication tool. I know, it was disappointing, I think, that, Oak Hill's approach to this didn't fall within those guidelines. And that puts the department, us, in kind of a tough position, right? I think the commissioner, other folks are kind of interested in seeing what Oak Hill brings to the table when they say they want to participate in this thing. What complicates that is some of the guidelines that we don't really have decision-making ability over, right? They're coming down from CMS, they're coming down from the federal government. I mean, we have some leeway there, but unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of workability on that end. So to answer your question directly, Barry, we do not have a way to communicate that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So at least it should be reflected in the minutes that, innovative approaches were, were at least presented, but unfortunately, were not able to be accepted.
Yeah, absolutely. Keith, just making a mental note here, or not mental note, just making a note here to reflect that in the meeting minutes, okay?
Got it. Thanks.
Also, Tracy Walker Journey Found, because we also have a supported housing project coming up, but not until 2026. So it falls outside of the time frames. I wonder how many other, if there's any way to capture, if it's been started to be captured at all, how many providers have things in the works that are outside of this, but that still fit in with the spirit of the initiative and in moving toward, less restrictive environments. For us, it'll be an expansion, not a transition of folks. We really, the people the Journey Found serves, we only have a couple that really could even, consider it. And even then it would probably take 2 to 3 years to prepare them for that. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to try to capture some of that industry wide, because I actually think it's probably bigger. What is going on is probably bigger than just this initiative. Yeah. And it's not, I think it was great that ARPA funds were able to give the jump start to maybe some organizations that otherwise wouldn't have been able to do it or wouldn't have thought of doing it. But there's Barry's piece, and then there's that piece as well.
Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. I appreciate that comment, Tracy. What I can say about supportive housing is we've brought on a consultant, Black Ink Consulting, who is working with our director of supportive housing and that supportive housing committee to officially develop a dedicated supportive housing webpage. I can't say what material is going to be highlighted on that webpage, but I do think it is the department's intent to kind of highlight the growth of supportive housing throughout the state, and there may be mention of providers who are kind of leading those efforts. And to your point, I think what has been disappointing to some folks is some of the timelines associated that came along with the ARPA money. I think it put our department in a tough place. I think it put some providers in a tough spot. Some of the kind of transformational change, right, that you were talking about, we weren't able to capture that because, what your agency is pursuing doesn't fall within that window. And that's unfortunate. And I think that's a loss that's kind of, unfortunately outside of our department's control, right? In a perfect world, if if I ran the country and I was the one giving out the ARPA money, I'd say, okay, how about, and I don't know how you develop these parameters or these timelines, but in reality, 6 to 8 years sounds a little bit better to me for allowing states to spend and kind of allocate this federal money. I made mention of this in the last meeting. 2.5, 3 years. I mean, the first year of this thing was more or less DDS just trying to figure out, okay, we got $100 million plus. How do we turn around and spend this? I've said it before. I think state government is kind of a slow walking beast. And that put us in a very difficult spot. So by year 2, we were kind of starting to come up with these initiatives. And again, that timeline created issues, unfortunate issues. The timeline, the rules around that federal money. I think it kind of blocked out folks like yourself, folks like Barry. So just wanted to acknowledge your point there, Tracy. Is there, I don't know if this is a question anyone is going to have the answer to, but as a department, could we have done anything differently?
Yes.
Barry?
Oh, I think, and it, again, you came in late, but the amount of bureaucratic red tape that held up so many innovations early on, again, using ours as an example, for the price of 2 group homes, I could have served 50 people. But because the proposal took 3 years to kind of get through the bureaucracy and then ultimately not be able to be funded, it eliminates a level of care that doesn't exist in the system that has promising practice to give 50 people alternative services, but it's not able to go through. So unfortunately, the bureaucracy is the bureaucracy, but how internally that could have been acknowledged and figured out, to me, that's a place that, you could look at root cause on why it is that some of these projects that didn't get approved in a timely manner, such that they could have been in practice for a couple of years while the ARPA money was flowing, as creating alternative service options to see. And, if, again, serving 50 instead of 10 is a better deal with an alternative option, that would be a good thing for the department to have as a new option. But, obviously that can't happen.
Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. Barry, appreciate that. Appreciate those points. One thing I was hoping to bring to this committee, and I hope I've done an okay job at it, is being able to have kind of open and honest conversation with each other. I do want to throw a question at you. Because I will say, I think one of the bigger failures the department made was not being able to engage Oak Hill and bring you guys to the table and get you to participate in the initiative. You're one of our larger providers. I think a lot of folks look to you guys for kind of guidance and that sort of thing. Is there anything kind of offhand as to why you chose? And I know Oak Hill kind of operates a number of congregate settings and obviously works to transition folks to more community-based supports. Is there anything that kind of dissuaded you guys from, and honest question here, dissuaded you guys from participating in STEP?
We made 3 proposals that didn't get accepted. So it wasn't that we didn't want to participate and didn't participate. It's just the department is challenged by innovative things. So it's just, that's, you know, it's not that we didn't participate. It was just the department chose not to fund them.
Tracy Walker, Journey Found again, and to sort of expand on Barry's point a little bit, I think there were missed opportunities, even when things didn't pan out. Early on, Peter was able to get CHFA to say, okay, under this set of circumstances, we would be willing to let somebody out of a CHFA mortgage. But because our plan included, moving one individual to a CRS, it was an interim, move them to a CRS, and 2 of them would move on. It couldn't go forward or wasn't allowed to go forward under the ARPA initiative. However, getting that concession from CHFA was a missed opportunity for the whole industry. Because that's been a stumbling block for the department and for providers forever, that these CHFA homes, they don't belong to providers. You can't get out of the mortgage, mortgage any which way. You look at it, even if moving the people out of there is the best thing to do. And I think we missed an opportunity there. It's like, we had them at the table. They were willing to consider certain circumstances. And it's like, okay, fine. If that situation wasn't going to move forward, then how can we use that opportunity of CHFA finally, saying, yes, there are ways in which we would use our right to allow it, because the way it reads, basically, it's up to them. If they agree, then you're not in default under all of these kinds of things. And I'm sure there are other opportunities like that could have informed other parts of the work. That just happens to be the one that, I'm aware of, because it was our experience.
Yeah, Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. Again, some of the rules, regulations that came down with that federal money that was ultimately kind of infused into the STEP initiative created a number of issues. Barry, Tracy, those opportunities that you guys talk about, I would continue to encourage you to talk to the department and have conversations about what that looks like outside of STEP, outside of ARPA, so you don't get that red tape. I mean, unfortunately, there are things that we just can't say yes to because, you say yes to something like that, auditors come in and it kind of creates a number of issues. So there are instances, not always, but there are plenty of instances where the department's hands are tied, even when someone comes to the table with a unique idea, a creative idea. But again, just kind of continue to encourage you guys to have those conversations with department leadership. Michael, I know you had your hand up for a little bit of time there.
Sure. Michael Beloff, parent and agency board member. I think from the parent side, I think one of the challenges was I'm not sure they really understood what they were being asked. You had parents who have housing in a group home, and I don't know there was anything real new to excite them, to really incentivize them to do something different in terms of the way it was presented, which is like, well, your kid's been in a group home. We now want to send them someplace else. There'll be less support. And I think the highlights of what it was going to be for the existing folks may not have been enough, even from the standpoint of moving folks from day services to employment, because for a lot of parents, they're going from getting 30 hours a week of supports to getting less hours a week of supports. That was not really a big, huge incentive for a lot of families, saying, well, okay, my kid's going to have a job, but there may not be that much else for them to do throughout the week versus them being engaged 30 hours a week, because we don't really have a system to say for most kids. And again, I know some agencies, and Ableist has been really good with this, with my son in particular, in combining DSO and supported employment. But the idea is, if my kid's in a program 9 to 3, 5 days a week, and you're going to say, well, he's not going to work 15 hours a week, but then we won't have anything else for him to do the rest of the time. And if we move him over to the employment side, he can't do the DSO. That's not going to be real attractive to parents. from that standpoint. I really wish there would have been something in terms of, and it sounds like some of the proposals that didn't come through may have done this, something real innovative in housing to be available for families, for those families who don't have funding. Because that's where the real need are. For families who have funding, they're fat and happy. They don't want to go. They don't want to change. And there has to be something really exciting for them to want that change. And if there's change, and then there's ability for other families who don't have funding or might be able to restructure CFC and IHS and so forth to do something, interesting for those kids who maybe don't need a group home and to get them into residential sooner rather than later, I think that would have been very exciting for families and gotten them very engaged.
Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. Thank you, Michael. Heather?
Heather Latora from Marrakesh. Michael totally distracted me because this is a huge thing. Like, Southbury Training School is not closed because the people living there or their guardians are keeping them there. Why didn't we concentrate on the people that don't have services yet and making sure that they are getting into their right services and not going to group homes? You always make that point, and it's just so good. Sorry, you distracted me from what I wanted to say as well, which is, I joined the residential committee with Peter on purpose because we started out with more IHS than we have now because it was a long time ago before it was called IHS, and because of risk, they ended up being CRS placements, and now we watch people too much. But so we're trying to unravel that. But honestly, during the process, there were a lot of good things that happened, like the rent subsidy loosened up and some other good things happened, which were great. But what blocked us, because we were really late in the game, even though I was on the committee and I'm like, we have to submit this. But every time we're about to submit a plan, someone's stuck at a regional center, have to get out. Someone's in the hospital, take them now. And we didn't have bandwidth at that time. And not that I have a lot right now either, but you're talking about all this stuff that, number one, and you're right to start the meeting like that. We already do it. I'm sure Deloitte heard that more. They probably told you like that is what every single agency or just me, but we already do that. We do that all the time. We do that without thinking. We're always looking for people to be more independent. And but we were dealing with a lot of crisis with people living in hospitals, people living at regional centers, people in the step down unit taking people out. And so that's where our DDS people that we talk to every day wanted us to concentrate on, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to then be okay, let's submit it. But we did finally, and we do have someone that switched to employment, so we have one out of many to go. But we're working on it. And but during that meeting, those meetings with Peter, one day I'm just like, let's just submit a requisition to change our ARPA ask, because obviously we figured it out in the middle, like, hey, if we change what we're asking for, then we're all going to be on the same page. We're going to have enough for everybody. And Peter's just like, we're just not going to do that. That's a lot of time. That's, we're not going to do it. But I really wish we did. I think everybody had a light bulb over their head at some point during this process that said, I wish we asked for something else or different timing or different way to do it. We all, once we started talking, that light bulb came on, and then it was all like, just throw it. We can't change it. It's just too much time. But there was a mechanism to change it. It just would have been a lot of time. And I think that's where we get stuck, is that we just put something in, we make a waiver, we do something, and then we say, that's the way it is. And we should be way more innovative than that in Connecticut. The people here are, and we should do it. We should change it when we know it's not 100% right for the people in Connecticut.
Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. Thank you, Heather. Sometimes I feel guilty on these committee calls because I don't bring that kind of subject matter expertise to the table that Peter did. I don't have a lot of answers to these questions. What I can say is, look, as a department, do we have faults? Obviously. Are there things that we could improve upon? Yes. Is it always easy? Absolutely not. And I think that's the nature of state government. It is very difficult sometimes for us to kind of quickly pivot and change our approach on things. I know there was kind of in the beginning of this thing, resource teams, internal folks, external folks, trying to make adjustments to guidance, rules. I think we did the best we could. And, you know, I will say, I think we got a solid product out of it. Is it perfect? No. But I think it focuses on important work. And I think that important work is where you have interested individuals who want to move to more community-based supports. It's in our best interest to support those folks, help them transition. It frees up space in congregate settings for folks who are on the emergency wait lists, for those who have more medically or behaviorally complex needs to move into those slots. This is important stuff. Is it the kind of end all be all? Absolutely not. Is there more work to be done? Absolutely. What I will say is, look, I appreciate you guys kind of pointing out where we can make adjustments. I can't make promises that, you know, we're going to fix all those issues. But you know, again, what I wanted to bring to this committee was just open and honest conversation. If it's an idea that we can kind of make work, I am more than happy to go to bat for anybody on this call to kind of see if we can make that happen. Barry, then Shannon.
Yeah, Barry Simon O'Kill. Yeah, Gunnar, you know, thank you. And you have brought a level of openness and honesty, which, you know, I do appreciate. And I know that you can't, change the direction of the department. So, you know, from that end, please don't take this in any other way other than, you know, you have made it safe to have open and honest conversation, and hopefully it can help the department, you know, right itself going forward. I will just throw out that, you know, to just think about. So we currently have 4 vacant group homes. I am going to backfill those 4 vacant group homes. And so people are going to go into those slots. And so you will now have people back in residential settings rather than going into alternative, innovative, promising practice kinds of things that currently don't exist. So the department is going to spend the money. It's just, it has missed the opportunity to create more cost-effective, innovative, and alternative kinds of programs in its continuum of care. And so off of, you know, what Michael, you know, pointed out in a really positive and well-stated manner, is that the people are gonna come off the wait list to go into those programs. And, you know, that's gonna happen. So instead of serving 50 people that are on the wait list, you're gonna serve 10 people on the wait list. And so mission accomplished? I don't know.
Sure. Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. Barry, look, I wasn't involved in the review of your proposal. I don't know what conversation you had with the department. I looked through your proposal. Is it a heavy lift for DDS? Yes. You know, is there a lot of work that needs to be done to figure out how it kind of fits into our service provision, all that sort of stuff? Absolutely. Can we make it happen during the ARPA period? No. But you know, I'd continue to encourage you, and someone may yell at me for this, but I continue to encourage you to have that conversation with leadership. Get them at the table and say, look, this is my proposal. I want to, you know, we want to seriously pursue this. We think these are the benefits, and this is how it can kind of help shape services through DDS. I don't know what the response to that will be, but yeah, the unfortunate thing, Barry, is we have these kind of strict guidelines and regulations at the federal and state level that just, there was nothing we could do. And I get you, you know, is it better to capture all 50 and approach servicing those folks differently so they're more successful? Absolutely. And then just having a few folks wind up in a group home? Yes. So, you know, encourage you to just continue to have that conversation, get leadership at the table. And again, I get yelled at for that, so be it. Shannon?
So I second that. You know, I encourage you to continue to push. I mean, what you're talking about, Barry, is something that we've talked about for years, right? I guess what I would say is this is I think that it's important for us to understand through this. I mean, I think first of all, we should celebrate all that has happened, because everything that has happened is a step towards transforming our system in a way that it needs to go, right? So, we have made tremendous progress as a system because of these ARPA dollars, even if it didn't happen for as many people and as many as agencies as we wanted. So I think that that's important, and I think it has been transformative. I think it would probably be helpful for us to have some sort of process where we can engage providers like Oak Hill and Marrakesh and Journey Found and other providers who are the innovators in our system, right? Afterwards, to really fully understand what the obstacles are in our system to innovation, even when there is a lot of money on the table to do it, right? So this was this like rare and unique opportunity, and yet there were providers that really weren't able to do it. So what are the obstacles in our system that prevent that? Because the truth is a lot of providers have been innovating for years, even when there haven't been incentives, and they're going to continue to do that. So how do we create a system that is more receptive and more able, I mean, to work with the providers where they're at, right? And I don't, I get it. I understand more now than I ever did before, being in the position that I'm in, why it's so difficult, to make change, working in this like massive bureaucracy. But I do think that we are at this like unique moment in time where we have fantastic leadership at DDS that wants to innovate and wants to support more people and wants to make positive changes in the system. And we have all these great leaders in our community who also want to do the same thing. So we've started something here. Let's keep it going, and let's figure out how we can be better at it, so.
Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. Shannon, I really appreciate those comments. Kathleen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, to what Shannon just said, and I think we all sympathize with the fact that you're not going to change DDS. But openness is an important first step. And if there were funds set aside for innovation, and there were some kind of committee, like, okay, the system is the system, right? And whether you agree or not, I think the system basically works. That's why it's there. And so if you can't change the system in the way that, we as CEOs, frankly, sometimes can within our own organizations, what if there were a funding stream set aside to allow for the innovation that the system that's in place to run exactly the same way every day to give everybody a fair shot at service? What if there were a segment of resources set aside to do innovation outside that system? And there was a system in that fund to review and approve that included both families, providers, and DDS leadership. And not all that different from this group.
Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. I get tired of saying that. Kathleen, that's a very interesting idea. I'm not sure how it'll go over with some of the decision-making folks in our agency, and I'm not saying it, it's going to go over like a lead balloon, but that's certainly, I think, something we can bring back and pitch as an idea. I personally like the idea of kind of an innovation committee that continues to look at the issues that are occurring within DDS, outside DDS, where we can make improvements, where we can set aside pots of money for providers who kind of come up with innovative approaches like, the one Barry had pitched to kind of solve some issues that the department has been dealing with for a number of years. If you're comfortable with it, I at some point in time can certainly take that back and we can see what that looks like, how that proposal lands. To Shannon's point, again, proponent of open and honest conversation. Are there faults with DDS? Obviously, can we make improvements in certain places? Yes. But at the end of the day, I think STEP, like I said, it's highlighting some of that important work that you guys are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I do feel as though we are at somewhat of a crossroads here. Are we moving away from congregate settings? No. But there does seem to be this push towards more community-based supports that promote autonomy, more dignity at risk, individual choice, that sort of thing. And I think you see that with things like, some of the classic support options, IHS, community companion home, self-direction. But there's kind of exciting stuff on the horizon that we're starting to kind of scratch the surface on. Things like assistive tech, remote supports, supportive housing, those are relatively new supports. And I had the opportunity the other day, it was a very tough thing to watch. I watched a documentary called Willowbrook, The Last Great Disgrace. It was Geraldo Rivera, a reporter that went to an institutional setting in upper state New York back in the 80s. And the way the individuals with intellectual disabilities were cared for in that setting was beyond egregious. And I think that was kind of back during the 1980s. And looking at where we are today, again, do we have a perfect system? No. Have we made incredible progress? Yes. And, I think a lot of that is due to, folks like yourself on the call that have kind of led some of that change over the decades. But, personally, I'm excited about kind of the point in time where we are. I don't know how much longer this committee is going to be meeting. I want to say November is going to be our last call. But Kathleen, to your point, I do think it is important to bring like-minded folks together. I like having Barry at the table, Shannon at the table, Amy, Dr. Ellis. You got Sarah, my counterpart on the ARPA team, Tracy. If you bring like-minded folks together, are you going to be able to solve every problem? No, but can we make progress? Yes. So I'd like to relay that idea to some folks that make the decisions here at DDS, and we can take a second look at what this looks like post ARPA, because there will continue to be issues that our department needs to address, that you as providers need to address. And I'm always a proponent of bringing folks together to kind of make those decisions. Kind of rambling here, but a lot of good points made today. Good conversation. At this point, it's 2:26. Want to pass it back to you guys. See if you got anything else for discussion before we step off here. All right. Hearing nothing, I will make or ask for a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Seconded by Barry. All right, that concludes today's ARPA Advisory Committee meeting. The next meeting will occur in November. Again, appreciate you guys coming to the table on this. Appreciate the discussion. I hope we can continue to kind of make an impact going forward. anything comes up in the interim before we meet again in November, just, let each other know, send something to that group email chain we got going on, but appreciate your engagement as always. Have a
Thanks,
good rest of your
Gunnar.
week.
Thanks,
Bye,
Gunnar.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Gunnar, I
I
have
know.
a quick question. Oh, he hung up. I gotta email him.